Hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for tuning into the Spiritual OT channel and joining us today for another interview in this series. I am thrilled to be joined by Natalia, who is an occupational therapist and the director of Inside Out OT. Natalia is based in the Northern Territory, and she's joined me today to talk all things OT, neurodiversity, spirituality, and I guess how we can be holistic in our approach to practice. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Steph, and thank you so much for having me in this space. It's so lovely to connect with other OTs who just are on the same mindset. I love it. Love it, love
Yeah,
it.
me too.
So thank you.
It's so beautiful. You're welcome. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, can you tell me just a bit about you? Like, what do you love? What do you do? Who are you? Let us get to know you a little
So I am an occupational therapist, as you know. I am based here in Darwin in the NT up north, where it is always hot.
bit.
A pleasure in itself. But yeah, I'm an OT. I love things, all personal development. I spend most of my time like in books, listening to podcasts, journaling, listening to courses, and cooking as well. I love cooking. Outside of the daily grind type of cooking. So
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean by
I know
that.
exactly what you mean. You love cooking when you don't have to do it.
Exactly. And when I can experiment a little bit, try something new, I love all things like novelty. So yeah, anything that's new, exciting, new adventure, new experiences, I love all that. But as an OT, as I said, I'm based in Darwin. I work for myself. I am the director of Inside Out OT, and I work within the community space, so the NDIS system.
Mhm.
Which is great and complicated at the same time, but it's really good for families to have access to funding and get supports as they need. So yeah, I predominantly see, a lot of little kids, but I don't necessarily like to label myself as a pediatric OT because I definitely work on the whole family holistic kind of level. So even though the clients are are the children, I definitely work hands-on with the parents too. So yeah, that's a little bit about
Yes.
me.
That definitely resonates with me. I feel like, especially since I started working for myself, I did the same thing. I sort of was expanding past working with just children, working into family constellations. And then I guess along the way, I've started working with some adults as well, particularly those who have been, late diagnosed, neurodivergent, who are sort of, discovering themselves in that way. And I think, I don't know whether you resonate with this, but like as we explore more of that holistic approach to our role, it's hard then to define yourself to one population, because even if you start working with a child or a teen or whatever, like when does that relationship stop? When, it just sort of keeps evolving as they age, or as, different family members come and go. And yeah, so it becomes quite fluid, I think, anyway.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's such a whole family experience, isn't it? Like we can't have, of course, we have an impact on the child themselves, but what we teach and how we guide needs to be, I guess, continued on through the parents themselves and through the family members, all the adults in that child's life. So we're very much across, all of the people that are involved in the family. And so, yeah, I think that's why I like the term occupational therapist rather than just putting myself in a box of pediatric OT.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
yeah,
totally agree with that. So
absolutely.
why did you want to become an OT? What sort of sparked your interest there?
Thinking about it, I've had so many experiences from when I was a child that really guided me into OT. So I'll take it a little bit further. Um, Growing up, I had a mother who was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at 17. So this was
Wow.
before I came along and my sister came along. And so I, growing up with a mum who needed support, daily support with just simple things like opening up a jar or, making her something, just anything really.
Yeah.
Really, it just was a huge eye opener. Like, oh, okay, you can't do this simple thing for yourself. Okay, why is that? And then, just kind of stepping into that role a little bit too as a child of just being like, okay, my mum's a little bit different. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. But it did just broaden my horizon from that aspect a little bit. And so as I got older, I would hear stories from her too of when I was a little kid, how she needed support for my nappies to be changed from my older sister, and so little things like that, there little stories here and there were really, they just had an impact on me from my heart
Mhm.
space. And so I knew immediately that I wanted to go into a helping role in my career. And so as we get older and we go through high school, we start to think about different careers and whatnot. I don't know if you had this at your high school, but we had a person who was like a counselor for like a careers counselor. I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
if
yeah.
we definitely had that. And I remember having this conversation with her saying, I just want to I want to do something that's in between psychology and nursing. And like thinking back now, I'm like, wow, okay, OT is definitely not psychology nor nursing, but that
Yeah.
was the terminology I had at the time. And
Yeah.
so she had no idea what I was talking about either. She's like, what do you mean you want to do something in between there? So I took the matter into my own hands and Googled that literally. Like I literally Googled psychology and nursing and somehow came across the term occupational therapy. And I was like, okay, what's this? Got a bit curious. And yeah, when I read the line of, supporting people with their independence with daily activities, I was like,
Yeah.
it's as if I was born for this. Like it,
Yeah.
it just really hit home for me. So I was like, okay, let's explore this. And yeah, instantly knew that that was exactly what I wanted to do. So yeah,
Yeah. That's so powerful, isn't it? I
yeah.
think a lot of people I speak to that go into OT say the same thing, that they just have this calling to help people, or they've had some sort of lived experience that has they've either experienced an OT because, they've needed one or whatever, or that role of being helped or being the helper, earlier in life, and the reward that comes from that. And I think our lived experience often brings so much to how we practice in a way. You know what I mean? Like our ability to connect with people when we've actually been in a position where we understand some of the challenges, or um yeah, I don't know, I think that sort of shapes how we show up.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, our lived experiences, it shapes our our perception, and our perspectives as well. So we most definitely take that with us when we meet our clients and families and interact with them. And even just sharing personal stories like that
Yeah.
too, they can see where you're coming from and they know that, you know, um, that you can connect almost as well from
Yes.
that struggle or that lived experience that you went through. And I think that's really beautiful. And that's where the foundation is laid, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. That connection and relationships that we build with people, I think, is the most important part of what we do.
Oh, absolutely. I think without connection, you really can't go far, or at least
Yeah.
that's what I truly believe. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
So, in regard to, neurodivergent affirming practice and, how more and more of this is coming out now, tell me what your experiences with this has been, and also if there's been a particular moment in your personal or professional life where it's shifted how you practice. Because I think more traditionally, when we were at uni and stuff like that, this whole idea about affirming different neurology wasn't around. A lot of evidence-based is now considered to be quite a negative experience for a lot of neurodivergent people.
Mm.
So I know a lot of, professionals have been through this real shift, and I just wondered what your experience has been.
Yeah. So I think I've always thought of myself as a bit of a black sheep in my family, and I always felt like no one truly understood me. And so I think just having that experience early on in my life also, of course, translated into the way that I practice. So
Mhm.
I very much am in tune to the individual, and I can see how everyone is, in fact, an individual. No one fits in a box, and we need to treat people like that, as if they are individuals. And for me, when I think of neuro affirming practice, the words that come into my head immediately are acceptance, inclusivity, individuality. And so for me, it's almost like a given that OTs are neuro um, neurodiversity affirming,
Yeah.
because they're our values, really, is to just take the person as they are and just support them along their journey. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective on that.
I love that because it's like it's moving away from even comparing neurology to neurology or not, and just zooming further out and saying you're a human being, and I'm just going to meet you wherever you are, however you show up, with whatever you need, because my job as an OT is to do exactly that, to see you as an individual and assist you in what you need to achieve your goals, regardless of any label or, yeah.
Exactly right. And I love the fact that you pointed out that we're all human. Like that is the baseline, isn't it? Like we are
Mm.
literally all humans. Like, and we need to, I think about it a little bit more in this aspect too. It's like, just because I wear an OT hat, for example, it doesn't mean that I don't feel feelings and I'm, not experiencing the human experience as well, and
Yes.
vice versa as well with our clients. So they're not just simply their diagnosis, they are a human being going through human experience. So yeah.
Yeah. And how much power there is in sort of zooming back and checking in on that part of what we can offer as the therapeutic experiences when we're sitting across from someone or we're engaging with someone about their life is simply to see them and hold space for them and be like, I'm also human. I've also had XYZ experiences. I resonate with what you're talking about, or perhaps I don't, and I haven't had that experience, but I can empathize with you, and I'm here to listen and hold space for that. Um, and I think sometimes it's almost like I feel like a lot of people go and see professionals, whoever they might be, and there's that power imbalance, right? There is, people, especially if they're coming as the client.
Mm,
Even I know myself, when I've sought out a professional, it almost feels like I've automatically put myself lower somehow. Like I'm going to them, I'm asking for help. They're the professional, I'm just the client. And I feel like what we're sort of doing and have the power to do is be like, no, I'm no, this is a complete level playing field here. I'm sharing in this lived experience with you to assist you. I bring in a certain level of expertise that I have from my experience and my training that I'm offering to you, but the power and the empowerment is given back to the individual. They don't need us to enable things. They don't need us to come in and fix it, but rather we can be there to guide and support, you know.
absolutely. And I always say this to my clients and their parents too, that they are their own expert. Like, I'm not the expert here. You guys are the expert. And I'm just simply bringing awareness to different aspects of your life and how I can support. But truly, you know yourself best. And so it's
Yes.
just about affirming that too, and bringing that to their awareness as well.
Yeah. Um, let's talk about spirituality in OT because
Mm.
I know that we're both super passionate about this topic. Um, and I think we're already sort of touching on it, right? In this idea of humanness, this idea of like belief and connection, meaning as well. Um, But especially as well with children, I feel like there's so much space for us to explore more about identity and meaning. And yeah, I just love to sort of hear what you're doing in this space and what your perspectives are on that.
Absolutely. Look, I've been on my own spirituality journey as well the last couple of years. And just going through that for myself has shifted everything for me in the way that I practice. So I'm very much more attuned to the individual. I,
Mm,
and I can understand them a little bit better as well, and really go deep as to why certain things are happening for them, or to them. And so for me, going on that personal journey, I have definitely included that in the way that I practice. And so, what I like to do with my kids is start to bring their level of awareness to themselves. So, whether that be with sensory preferences, okay, well, what do you do in the morning? Oh, I like to run around before I jump in the shower. Okay, well, that's very clear to me that you need that in order to regulate. And so it's just about bringing their level of awareness to themselves, so that they can make choices for themselves, be
mm,
empowered for themselves, and get to know themselves a little bit better. um, and this goes hand in hand with, the models that we're taught at uni as OTs, right?
yeah.
If you just look at the MOHO model, like the model of human occupation, there's a section in there that is purely about volition, which is all about personal causation, values, interests, all those intrinsic things that are only individual. It's nothing external to them. It's all internal for them as the individual. And so that's why I think spirituality and OT, they just mesh to me. They're not two separate things. They go hand in hand.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it's just been really nice to come back to those models as well. I know that throughout my uni journey, even though my experience at uni was fantastic, I loved it. I never really understood the theoretical side of learning things through the degree. It was a lot of things were cemented for me through placements and through the doing part, and even, being an OT now. And so yeah, I think over time I realized that spirituality has it's a huge portion of OT itself.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because I think the word spirituality sometimes gets kind of brushed off as being like woo woo or having to do with like things that aren't real or whatever. But like you said, in our models we learn like CMOP is another example where under person they have spirituality. They've actually used that word and they're referring to any forms of belief or religion or, you
Yeah.
know, connection to source that people use as a way of coping and bringing meaning to life or whatever it might be. But I think it's really interesting to have these open discussions and be like, fundamentally, when we talk about spirituality and we use that word, what we're talking about is those intrinsic things, that sense of what it means to be human for that individual and how do they make sense of the world from the inside out and how can we allow them to go inward like you were saying with exploring how the world feels, how it makes sense, all that kind of stuff with a sense of autonomy and knowing that that's okay. It's okay if you experience things differently to another person or if your sense of meaning is derived from something different to someone else or if what feels good to you is not the same as other people, which then ties back beautifully to this neuroaffirming movement of we don't all have to show up in the same way with the same social preferences, with the same sensory preferences, um, in order for us to be, living and engaging and, having a sense of community and humanness and everything else, right? Um, and I think that's where, the more we talk about it in this way, the more people relate to what we're talking about when we say spirituality, because we're just talking about anything and everything that brings meaning, that intrinsically motivates, that has that sense of volition, that gives people hope, that gives people dreams for the future, our inspiration, our creativity, all these kind of things tie together. And I think too, there's a lot more research too around the use of spirituality and occupational therapy that I've been exploring lately as well, which I'm finding really interesting, because I think a lot of the time we get a bit bogged down in always the things that we can see, like physically, like see, touch, hear, have a really obvious sensory experience of. But there's so much more to us, right? Like energetically, and, like look at co-regulation for an example. We know, and the science shows us, that we can sit opposite another human being and practically lend them our nervous system purely based off the energy that we're giving out.
Yeah.
um and that's exchanges of energy. And I think, once we delve further into these kinds of ideas and we recognize that there's so much more going on beneath the surface, and sort of honoring that and making space for that, I think we
Mhm.
can take healing and therapy and all this stuff to a whole new level.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, it's all of those things that you can't see. It's the things that you feel and you know to be true for yourself.
Yes.
And validating that for some people is just, it makes such a big difference for them and the way that they move and lead themselves in their own lives. And yeah, it's something that we definitely need to talk about more, I think, in the OT world and just in general as well with the people that we surround ourselves with. It's really not this woo-woo thing.
Yeah.
It's so not. And I just want to dismantle that completely. Like it's just something that we all experience. It's just a matter of, your level of consciousness to that.
Yeah. And how you choose to identify with it. I know some people would classify themselves as religious, and have a religion. Some people prefer to consider themselves to be, spiritual, or have their own ideas that haven't stemmed from, say, a specific teaching or whatever it might be. Um, and I think, the importance is to accepting that whatever your reality is and whatever you are experiencing in regards to that internal experience of existing, I suppose, is valid, and that there's no right or wrong for what you believe or what you feel, or and some people, I think, interestingly enough, if someone expresses that they're atheist, they don't have a particular belief, um, even that in itself is a way of experiencing humanness. You could argue that that is their experience of spirituality, that they don't have a particular belief, but then again, that needs to be honored as, like you were saying, that expression of consciousness. And coming back to meeting everyone where they're at and with what feels right for them, and starting from there and allowing our experiences of life and meaning and everything to come from that place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said. Yeah, it's really, really
Yeah.
so
I,
powerful too. And I think we're not really aware of how powerful that side can really be for us
mm,
as individuals, but also for the people that we work with.
yeah.
Like it truly has or can have a huge impact on that person's trajectory and the way that they experience life. And
Yeah.
so if we can come in with or having that knowledge and understanding that and just allowing them to be who they want to be and just accepting that too is huge on their nervous system, on our nervous system, on the collective as well. Because really, of course, we're individuals, but we're very much a part of a whole ecosystem of the whole
Mm,
world and
yeah.
universe. So,
And you look at that ripple effect, like if we can co-regulate with one other person, imagine what we can do if we're working with communities of people, where we start allowing them to come home to themselves, to remember who they are, to connect in with that sense of self and feel safe there. Because I think, one of the biggest issues that we face today with the children that we work with, even the adults that, we come across, is that, when we start looking at going inward to what it does feel like inside, a lot of the time that doesn't feel safe, right? And
Yeah.
so we're outside, of our bodies, figuratively speaking, trying to keep other people happy, trying to stay safe in the community, trying to live up to social expectations, trying to be what we've been taught we need to be. And then when we start kind of dismantling that, I think that can be really eye-opening. And I know you mentioned before your own experience of kind of this spiritual journey, and I share that experience myself, where I kind of dismantled what I had created as my sense of self, because I'd created that based off external influences that made me think I needed to show up a certain way in the world to be loved, safe, accepted, worthy, all those core beliefs. Um, and I think even just by talking about this, to anybody who's listening and hearing it, I think an important message is that person that you are fundamentally, that you were born to be, that is your true essence and consciousness that's underneath, that may have had all these layers put on from childhood, from expectations, from experiences, they're still there. And I think when we get back to that and we peel the layers of the onion off, or as I like to say, we take the coats off, all these heavy coats that we're carrying, and we find that person, I think that's where our true purpose, meaning, creativity, clarity comes from, in terms of giving us a sense of fulfillment in life. And I think if we can be doing this with children that we work with, allowing them to connect with that true essence, their uniqueness that they bring, rather than feeling like they have to dim their light in order to meet a social norm or fit into a classroom, or, whatever it might be, if we can allow that unique expression, we're setting these children up for so many more possibilities. And how boring would the world be if we were all the same?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So, so boring. And a lot of the kids that we see now too, they mask a lot of these things. They mask themselves. And for me, that's so heartbreaking, because I can relate to that too. I too
Yeah.
masked when I was a child, just to fit in, to people please, um, to fit in with family. Like, it just, and it didn't serve me. Now, as an adult, I know that that doesn't serve me. So,
Yeah.
um, going through that yourself and then being able to share that with the kids that I work with, it just is so meaningful for me, but also for them. They may not realize it in the moment, but I
Yeah.
think longer term they will realize. And yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's important, and I've been talking, this is a little bit tangential, but I've been talking a lot with like teachers and schools and things like that lately, about how we can increase an interest-based and strengths-based approach to learning. Because I know, historically there was this whole thing of, oh, well, we can't let so and so play Lego all day, or we can't let them, whatever their special interest might be, they've got to do other things, they've got to explore, other ideas and whatnot.
Mm.
Um, but I think sometimes, especially in younger children, when they have like that real special interest or this like passion or a skill, I feel like that's something we really need to foster.
Mm.
Because I truly believe, whether this comes from like an intuitive level, which again I think is so important for us to tap into our intuition in these kinds of roles and how we read people and things like that. But I think sometimes those interests are there for a reason. They're there for um, a purpose, to bring that this person has sort of brought with them into this human experience, and that it's got a role. And I feel like we could, in fostering those things by teaching through our interests, because then the motivation, the volition, that's all flowing. So we're going to learn quicker. We're going to hold that information for longer in our long-term memory, all that kind of stuff. And I know this is kind of a whole nother uh, topic, but I feel like there's a lot that could be explored through the way our education system works, in facilitating children's learning to be more validating of those unique interests and expressions.
Absolutely. And it's definitely a thing that I've started to incorporate too into my practice very early on, is just focusing on the child's strengths
Mm.
and having that strengths-based approach. I mean, it just is monumental, really. It you can't compare from, trying to fix the child or implement something that doesn't resonate with them, or they feel like they are lacking in that area, or whatever it may be.
Mm.
And coming in from this strength-based approach really does level helps them level up based on their strengths. And so that in itself is teaching them new skills and all of these things. And I think we definitely need to foster that into the education system. I can understand that it can be really challenging when
Yeah.
you're one person teacher amongst 30 odd kids, but if we can do that, and just simply recognizing that the child needs whatever support, or we just hold space for them to be themselves, that in itself truly is a lot. And sometimes in some cases it's enough.
Yeah. Just to be accepted, yeah, to be seen. Um,
And
I think
understood.
one of the greatest wounds that I see people carrying and those belief systems is that I'm not worthy or good enough. I'm not accepted for who I am. And I think, like you said, then sometimes that connection that we create with someone, even if it's like the shortest amount of time per day or whatever it might be, when we have sessions with children where it's just like, I just see you and accept you exactly as you are and exactly how you want to show up. And there's no negative connotation placed on any way that they're feeling or any action that they're doing when we show up with curiosity,
Mm,
um, and acceptance. That is so powerful. And like you said, sometimes that is enough,
absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. Even when we look at human needs, obviously one of the cores is safety, but a sense of belonging is very
Mm-hmm.
much included in that, isn't it? And so if we can provide that sense of belonging for that child, even if it's just 45 minutes, 1 hour for a week, fortnight, month, whatever it may be, that
Yeah.
will have a ripple effect. And if, like, could you imagine the impact if that child was experiencing that on a day-to-day through the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
100%.
Like, just the magnitude of that. Just even saying that, I've got chills. It
Yeah.
just, yeah. But it's always these little things that we can do to shift our perspective, or to support a child in whatever way, or like I said, just simply accepting and acknowledging them for who they are really does go a long way. And it'll help them with every single area of their life too. They'll be more willing to engage in class. They'll be more willing to participate in social activities. They'll be more willing to share their experiences as well, rather than just bottling it up inside. And so that has a impact on their emotional regulation. And
Mm.
that has an impact on all these other areas of life at home as well. And
Yeah.
it just shows you how one small thing really does impact everything else in a person's life.
Yeah. I think this is a really good point to sort of point out too. I think a lot of therapists, and I don't know, maybe parents too, get this kind of sense of imposter syndrome, like I can't do enough or I'm not doing enough, or I should somehow be like fixing the world or fixing all the problems, or that there's so much expectation on us. I
Mm,
guess in any role, teachers too, like in any role where you have a responsibility to assist a child, right? I think we go into this role because we want to help. And then the pressure of that is so monumental that it can be really disheartening sometimes. And I think what we're just saying here is such a beautiful takeaway, because sometimes it's the smallest thing, and our ability to be present and to be open and vulnerable ourselves and to connect with someone that can actually have such a ripple effect, even if in the moment we haven't mastered a particular skill, or we haven't, like finally tied our shoelaces, or whatever, those other things might be. If we've created an environment where someone feels safe and accepted and connected, that in itself is huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the fact that you brought up vulnerability in this as well.
Mm,
And I think when we can be vulnerable with the people that we work with, it's an open invitation for them to be vulnerable and to just allow them to be as well.
yeah.
When I say that, I think of this one particular client that I see. He's so beautiful. But I was sharing that I was feeling a little bit angry before I had come to the session. And his reaction was, "Oh, you feel angry too?" And I
Oh,
said, "Of course I do. I feel angry sometimes too." And one of the things that we are working on is emotional regulation for him. And so, me sharing and being vulnerable about the spectrum of emotions that I feel
mm,
allowed him to share times when he felt angry, or times when he felt upset or happy, or whatever it may be. And that in itself, for me, it was just such a beautiful moment. And it was a huge eye opener for him too. It's like, oh,
yeah.
you're an adult, but you too get angry? Like, wow, okay. And it just brings in that level of humanness again
Hmm.
to this, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think in a lot of what we do, there's such a separation between child and adult.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
certain behaviors that you don't do as an adult, we accept in a child, or vice versa. I
Mm,
was talking to someone earlier and we were saying about, in terms of disciplinary approaches, right? We were talking about how, if a husband like locked his wife in a bedroom for timeout, that would be considered abusive. But people are doing things like that to children all the time, and we just consider it discipline, right? So there's this separation in people's minds that children are somehow different, or have different like rights than adults.
mm,
And or there's like this disconnect somewhere. And I think when we start exploring this idea and allowing children to recognize and see that adults are human, and that they feel things too, and that they um make mistakes, or that they do the wrong thing sometimes, or that they need to apologize, or that they might have a meltdown, or need to recover in some way, whatever it is. And for the child to also be left feeling that just because they're a child doesn't mean that their feelings, their wishes, their needs aren't valid and need to be respected and honored by those around them. Um, and then there's always that balance, parents are responsible for keeping their children safe. They have to be like, no, I can't let you stick your finger in the plug hole, even though you really want to, because you might get electrocuted. But if we're curious with our children and we give reasons, and we say, this is why I can't let you do that, this is why I've had to move you away to keep you safe, blah, 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 but then give choice and control where it is appropriate. Like, does
mm,
it really matter if the child has a piece of toast or an apple after school? Do we really need to get into a power struggle about that for a battle if they want one over the other? Like, just thinking about why we do things, or how we see this disconnect almost between the experience of being an adult and the experience of being a child. I feel like, and this is all just kind of flowing out, I've never really thought too much about this, but if we can get a bit more of an idea of this fluidity between the two, that we are all human at different phases, and that we can relate to each other's phases. I feel like even though children haven't been adults yet, perhaps in this lifetime, depending on what your beliefs are,
mm.
there's a relational capacity that we can have throughout all the stages.
Absolutely. Oh, I love the way you talk and share information. It is just so beautiful. Um, and I totally resonate with that too. But even, just thinking about your own childhood, what would you have wanted as a child going through your own personal experiences? You would
Yeah,
have wanted to have an adult there that was supportive, that was validating, that saw you for you, that heard you, that understood you, and
yeah,
was able to comfort you. So it sometimes takes having to go through some of these lived experiences to truly understand how we can be better
Yeah.
a better human, but also, a better therapist for our clients and a better parent for our children as well.
Yeah.
And that again has that huge ripple effect.
Yeah. And I hope us sharing these discussions lets other people, whether you're a therapist, a parent, a teacher, and you've shared, some of these thoughts that we've had and we've been talking about, that there is this space to talk about it and to share these ideas. And I know, like Natalia and myself and a lot of our other connections, we just love talking about these evolutions in practice, in parenting, in teaching. Um, and so, if anyone wants to reach out and connect with us who's listening to this, please do so. Natalia, her Instagram is the Inside Out OT. And mine is SGR Occupational Therapy. But yeah, if anyone wants to ask us any questions or delve into anything further about this, I really encourage you to reach out. But yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to share on this topic, which I know has been huge today, and I absolutely love it. I love it all. But yeah, anything else?
I think if we just really take it back to the basics and just accept people for who they are, come in from a human to human perspective, we can really help shift the way in which society as a collective lives and perceives
Mm,
life and functions. So
yes.
yeah, I feel like the basics and the foundations are something we should always turn to when we're a little bit lost or confused or don't know which direction we need to go in.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing so openly and sharing your story with us today. And I really hope that we can have more discussions like this in the future.
Absolutely, always open for topics and discussions like this. And thank you so much for allowing me to be here. It's been an honor.
Not a problem at all, Natalia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.